My name is Lauren. I was 26 when my mom held my hand up in front of my fiance and said, "Well, I guess it's charming, if you like modest." That was the moment I stopped pretending they respected me. I used to think I could win them over, that if I worked hard enough, loved gently enough, they'd finally see me, not just as the lesser daughter, but as someone worth rooting for. But that night, under the hanging lights of a French restaurant my fiance Sam had chosen with so much care, I realized the truth. They never wanted me to win. We were supposed to be celebrating. Just the four of us, Sam and I, my mom Deborah, and my dad Mark, at a quiet bistro near the harbor in Annapolis. Sam had proposed that morning after a long walk by the water. It was perfect. He'd even asked my parents ahead of time for their blessing. I hadn't known that, of course, until later, because when he told them that night, they didn't smile. They blinked. Then Mom tilted her head and said, "Really? That's fast. We'd been dating for 2 years." "Don't take it personally," Sam whispered while we waited for appetizers. "Maybe they're just shocked." But it wasn't shock. It was disapproval masked as polite conversation. And then came the moment with the ring. I just reached for my wine glass when Mom caught my hand midair, pulled it into the table light, and said in her sharpest sing-song voice, "Oh, sweetie, it's sweet, very Etsy." The way she said Etsy made it sound like garbage. Sam tried to laugh it off, but I saw the flicker in his eyes. He'd spent months saving for that ring, custom designing it with a local jeweler because I'd once mentioned how I hated flashy diamonds. It was delicate, antique-inspired, with a marquise cut and tiny sapphires like my grandma's brooch. Mom let my hand drop like it was something sticky. Dad didn't say anything. He just cut into his steak and started asking Sam what kind of retirement plan his job offered. Like my engagement was a job interview I'd failed before it started. I wanted to disappear, but worse, I wanted to defend them. I kept thinking, maybe they're just awkward. Maybe this is how they are with everyone. But deep down, I knew. They'd always done this, just never so publicly. By dessert, they'd stopped talking about our engagement entirely and shifted the conversation to my younger sister, Jessica. "Oh, she's thriving," Mom gushed. "Her boyfriend just got promoted at the firm, full partner now. They're talking about summer in Europe. Can you imagine?" I sat there with my barely touched creme brulee, nodding while they practically wrote Jessica's wedding toast on a napkin. Sam held my hand under the table. "Let's get out of here," he said softly. "This isn't for us." I nodded, but we stayed, because leaving would make it real. The final blow came in the parking lot. As we said our goodbyes, my mom pulled Sam aside. I couldn't hear what she said, but I saw the way his expression shifted, like he'd been slapped in slow motion. He didn't tell me until later. She said, he paused, she said, "Jessica's always been more of a match for someone like you." I didn't cry. Not then, not even on the drive home. But 2 days later, a photo popped up on my phone. My mom, my dad, Jessica, and her boyfriend, all smiling beneath a banner that read, "Congratulations on your engagement. Balloons, wine, a cake, our family home decked out like a Pinterest dream." Only it wasn't for me. It was for Jessica. She wasn't even engaged. Not yet. I stared at the photo for what felt like hours. Jessica beaming, Mom mid-laugh, Dad holding up a champagne flute, a massive white and gold banner that read, "Congratulations to the future Mr. and Mrs." And not a single mention of me. The date stamp on the photo, less than 48 hours after the night they ridiculed my engagement. The air in my apartment felt thinner somehow. Sam wasn't home. He had a shift at the hospital, but I needed space anyway. I needed to feel everything I'd been burying since that dinner. The tightness in my throat, the shame rising in my stomach like bile, and the hollow pit where a daughter's pride should have been. I got in my car and drove straight to my parents' house in Laurel Springs. I didn't call first. I didn't want them to prepare their excuses. Their front lawn was filled with helium balloon stems poking from trash bags. Wrapping paper peeked out of the recycling bin. A silver heart-shaped centerpiece sat abandoned near the porch, one corner wilted by the sun. My engagement hadn't even earned a napkin. I rang the bell. Mom opened the door with that startled expression she used to fake when someone caught her gossiping. "Lauren," she said, clutching her cardigan tighter. "We weren't expecting you." "Clearly," I said, brushing past her. The house still smelled like buttercream and wine. Someone had been celebrating. Dad sat in the den, pretending to read the paper. Jessica was nowhere in sight. I stopped in the entryway between them. So, when were you going to tell me?" I said. My voice was steady, but only just. Mom blinked. "Tell you what, sweetheart." That you threw an engagement party for Jessica 2 days after you mocked my ring and whispered insults to Sam. The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was loaded. Mom glanced toward Dad, who folded his paper with the exaggerated care of someone avoiding responsibility. It wasn't exactly a party, she started. There was cake, a banner, balloons, champagne, I snapped. What would you call it? A polite snub? We weren't trying to hurt you, Dad said flatly. It was spontaneous. Spontaneous, with printed signage and catered food? Mom stepped forward. Honey, Jessica's was just more of a natural fit for a celebration. They've been talking about marriage for a while. I flinched like she'd slapped me. She's not even engaged yet. She will be soon, Mom said softly, as if that justified everything. I felt the room shift under me. It wasn't about Jessica. It never had been. Dad cleared his throat. Sam's a good man, but you have to admit, things have moved a little fast. 2 years is fast? Is that what this is about? He looked away. Mom crossed her arms. We just want what's best for you. No, I said, finally letting my voice rise. You want what's familiar. You want what's convenient. You want Jessica's story with Jessica's narrative on Jessica's timeline, and I'm the one who keeps ruining your perfect little picture. Her expression froze. You didn't even ask me how he proposed, or what the ring meant. You just picked it apart like it embarrassed you. She took a breath like she was going to explain something. I didn't let her. You embarrassed yourselves, I said. You insulted Sam. You insulted me. And then you threw a celebration for someone who hasn't even made a commitment. Dad stood now, too. Lauren, don't turn this into some competition. Your sister's moment doesn't erase yours. Mine never existed to you, I shouted. The room fell silent again. I stood there for another moment, breathing heavy, waiting for something. An apology, maybe. A flicker of shame. There was none. I turned and walked toward the door. You're overreacting, Mom called after me. I paused with my hand on the mug. No, I said. I'm finally reacting. 3 days passed. I didn't text, didn't call. Neither did they. I wasn't surprised. My parents had mastered the art of silence as discipline. Ever since we were kids, Jessica got warnings and lectures. I got distance. Cold withdrawal. It wasn't punishment. They'd say it was space to reflect. This time, I didn't reflect. I raged. Sam tried to be supportive, but I could see it in his eyes. The damage wasn't his to fix, but he'd been dragged into it anyway. I hated that. I hated that they made him feel small when he'd done everything right. When I finally told him about the party photo, he just nodded once and said, Of course they did. He didn't ask for details. He didn't need them. Then, Saturday afternoon, she showed up. I heard the knock and assumed it was a neighbor, maybe a package. But when I opened the door, Jessica stood there in a pale yellow trench, holding a bouquet of hydrangeas like a hostage. Hey, she said, smiling too brightly. Can we talk? I didn't move. About what? The party you didn't have? She blinked. Mom told you? I stepped aside, not because I wanted her inside, but because I needed to know what this performance was leading to. She walked in like she still owned my room, my things, my air. I didn't plan any of it, she said, setting the flowers awkwardly on the counter. It was Mom's idea. Dad just went along. Classic, I said. So why are you here? Damage control? She winced. No, I didn't want things to be weird between us, especially now. I narrowed my eyes. Now? She hesitated, then smiled again, because, well, Caleb's going to propose. Any day now. I'm telling you before Mom does something weird again. Any day now. That line hit harder than I expected. My jaw tightened. She misread my silence. I know it's been rough, but I want you there, Lo. I mean it. When it happens, whenever it does, I want you to be part of it. I already told Caleb that. I stared at her, trying to find the catch. Then she added, Also, I was wondering if maybe I could borrow that navy wrap dress you wore to Cousin Mallory's wedding. The one with the tie sleeves. It would look really good in pictures. There it was. I let out a low laugh, stepping back. You came here to ask for a dress. Her eyes widened. No, yes, but that's not the only reason. You want me at your engagement. You want my wardrobe. You want my silence. But you didn't say a word while Mom humiliated me in front of Sam. You didn't defend me when they threw you a party and ghosted me. You didn't even send a text. I didn't know how bad it looked, she cried. I thought it was just a small thing. Mom said you were being dramatic. She always says that, I snapped. And you always believe her. Jessica looked away, and for the first time, I saw something shift behind her eyes. Something almost like guilt, but it didn't soften me. You want me to play bridesmaid to a moment I didn't get, I said. You want me to cheer while you shine in the exact light I was shoved out of. That's not fair, she whispered. No, I said. It's finally accurate. She moved toward the door, fumbling with her coat. I just wanted to make things right. You wanted convenience. That's not the same. I didn't follow her out. I didn't touch the flowers. When the door clicked shut behind her, I leaned against it and exhaled. The part that hurt most, I'd almost said yes. Sunday evening, Sam and I were folding laundry in silence. That quiet stretched too long was never a good sign. His hands moved, but his mind was elsewhere. I could tell by the way he folded the same shirt twice. I ran into Jessica yesterday, I finally said. He glanced up. How was that? Like a game of emotional dress-up, I muttered. She wanted to include me in her future engagement, said she'd already picked out which of my clothes would look good in the photos. Sam snorted softly. That sounds about right. I tossed a towel into the basket. She said she didn't plan the party, that Mom just decided to throw it. She didn't stop it either, he said, his voice flat. The words sat heavy between us, and then, before I could second guess it, I asked, what did Mom say to you in the parking lot after dinner? He didn't answer right away. His fingers smoothed a pillowcase once, then again. Sam, I said more firmly, tell me. He met my eyes. She said, you weren't ready. I blinked. Ready for what? For marriage, for commitment, for someone like me, he said carefully. She told me you still had things to figure out, that you'd sabotage our future if I didn't slow things down. The room tilted. I sat down slowly on the edge of the couch. She said you'd ruin him, he added quietly now. That was her exact phrase. I couldn't speak. My hands curled into the hem of my sweatshirt, twisting fabric just to keep from shaking. I thought the ring comment had been cruel. I thought the party was the betrayal. But this? She tried to get rid of me. She said I deserved someone more polished. Sam continued. Someone with a stable background. Someone who wouldn't turn our relationship into a performance of rebellion. That last phrase landed like a slap. I knew exactly where she got it. She's used that line before, I said. Whenever I made decisions she didn't like. College major, moving out early, turning down that job she set up with Dad's firm. Everything I do is rebellion, not choice. He looked at me with so much sadness I had to look away. Why didn't you tell me? I whispered. Because I knew what you'd do, he said. You'd try to fix it, to explain her, to protect her from me somehow, even when she was insulting you. He wasn't wrong. For most of my life, I'd lived with a quiet instinct to shield the people who hurt me. From consequences, from confrontation, from discomfort, I'd smooth over what they shattered. It made me feel in control, even when I was anything but I wasn't that girl anymore. I need air, I said, grabbing my coat. Want me to come? No, you've done enough. The air outside bit at my skin, but I welcomed it. I walked 2 blocks down to the marina, past the bakery where Sam first kissed me, past the bookstore I used to sneak into as a teenager just to feel invisible on my own terms. I sat on a bench facing the bay. The water was dark, restless. I thought of every time my mom had said, I'm just being honest, when she was being cruel. Every time she framed favoritism as love in a different shape. Every time she warned me that independence was a phase, that stability meant submission, and that girls like me didn't marry well. We adjusted. She'd never wanted me to be happy on my terms. And now that I'd found someone who saw me clearly, she was trying to make him see differently. But she'd miscalculated something crucial. I wasn't 13 anymore, and I wasn't going to let her steal this from me. I didn't plan to go. The brunch wasn't for me. It never had been. It was one of Mom's precious quarterly events, mid-morning affairs at the Lakeview Country Club, where the air smelled like lemon polish and superiority. This one was billed as a casual celebration of milestones, which was her coded way of saying, Jessica gets spotlight, everyone else gets crumbs. But that morning, something in me cracked. I was tired of letting silence be mistaken for shame. I was tired of playing the invisible guest in my own life. I dressed simply, but precisely. Deep blue blouse, clean lines, no apologies. Sam offered to come. I told him no. This was mine to walk into. When I entered the club's atrium, heads turned, not because I was dramatic, but because I wasn't supposed to be there. Mom's face paled first. Then Jessica's eyes went wide. She was holding a mimosa and standing next to Caleb, whose hand rested on her back like a claim. "Lauren," Mom called, moving toward me with an urgent smile too tight to be real. "Sweetheart, I didn't know you were invited," I said. "I wasn't." She faltered. "Well, it's just that things have been tense. I didn't want to put pressure on anyone." "Don't worry," I said. "I brought my own pressure." Behind her, a long table was covered in brunch plates. Tiny quiches, fruit tarts, shrimp cocktails. At the center, a chalkboard sign in gold script read, "To milestones and bright futures." Beneath it, a framed photo of Jessica and Caleb. Not engaged, not yet. I walked over and looked down at it. "Interesting centerpiece," I said. Jessica stepped beside me, whispering sharply, "Lauren, please don't cause a scene." I turned to her. "Then maybe don't host one." Caleb cleared his throat, shifting uneasily. "It's great to see you, Lauren." "You too," I said, though I didn't look at him. My gaze went to Dad, standing at the far end of the table talking to a cluster of silver-haired business partners. He saw me and looked away. Typical. I picked up a mimosa from the drink tray and tapped it gently with my nail. "Excuse me," I said loud enough for the room to pause. "I'd like to propose a toast." Mom froze. Jessica's eyes begged, but no one moved to stop me. "To milestones," I said, raising my glass. "To celebrations that aren't about timing, but approval. To the kind of futures that are framed, literally, before they even exist." A few chuckles, a few confused looks. "And to the daughters who aren't invited to their own families' tables until they stop asking." I sipped slowly, deliberately, then set the glass down. "I'll see myself out." But before I could turn, Mom grabbed my arm. "Lauren, you've made your point." I looked at her hand. "Have I?" Her voice dropped. "You don't want to make things harder than they already are." "You already did," I said. "When you told the man I love that I'd ruin him. When you threw a party for my sister while pretending my engagement didn't happen. When you tried to make my silence part of your decor." She opened her mouth. I shook my head. "Don't. Just don't." And I left without looking back. The air outside was crisp, the kind of cold that wakes you up from something deeper than sleep. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I just walked back to my car and drove straight to Sam's place. When he opened the door, he didn't ask what happened. He just wrapped his arms around me. I let him, because for the first time, I didn't feel small in the aftermath. I felt seen. It arrived on a Wednesday, mid-morning, plain cardboard, no return label. Just my name and my mother's unmistakable script. Sharp, angular, the kind of handwriting that made even birthday cards feel like legal notices. I almost didn't open it. I stood in the hallway turning it over in my hands, debating whether this was a trap or a peace offering wrapped in recycled paper. Sam watched from the kitchen, eyes cautious but silent. We both knew that whatever was inside wasn't going to make anything simple. I peeled the tape back slowly. Inside, one photo album thick with pages, and a folded note on top. 2 words written in that same blade-thin hand. "Thought you should have this." That was it. No apology, no context, just a tone that implied generosity, as if she were giving me something precious instead of returning something she'd buried. I sat down on the living room rug and opened the album. At first, it was familiar. Childhood photos, birthday parties, school plays, me with frosting on my cheeks, Jessica in matching outfits, our dad in his polo shirts, an unchanging grin. But as I turned the pages, something shifted. I wasn't fading out, I was disappearing. There were fewer pictures of me after age 10. By 12, I was in the background. By high school, I was practically gone. One photo stuck to the page awkwardly. I peeled it back. It was my high school graduation. I remembered the ceremony vividly, the boiling heat, my sweaty cap, the way Mom said I should smile less toothy in photos. But this picture wasn't posed. It had been taken from the side, unflattering and rushed. I was alone. Jessica's prom pictures filled the next 3 pages. 3. I shut the book. My throat tightened in a way I hadn't expected. Not from sadness I could handle. This was a different kind of ache, like I'd just found evidence of my own erasure. "She never threw any of this away," I said aloud. Sam looked up from the kitchen. "What?" "She didn't destroy it. She kept it, all of it, in a box. And now she's giving it to me like it's a favor." He walked over and sat beside me. Maybe it's guilt. I shook my head. No, it's worse than that. It's control. She wants me to think she remembers, that I mattered. But this isn't memory, it's proof. Proof that even when I was right there, I was never the one in focus. Sam rested his hand on my knee, grounding me. Then, without thinking, I turned to the back of the album. One envelope was taped inside the final cover. Old, yellowed, sealed. The handwriting wasn't hers, it was mine. I stared at it for a moment before carefully tearing it open. The letter inside was dated the summer after I turned 16. I recognized it the moment I saw the first line. It was a letter I'd written to my grandmother before she passed. A letter I'd slipped into the mail and assumed was lost, until now. I read the words like I was reading someone else's voice. Desperate, honest, full of things I hadn't known how to say out loud. Dear Nana, I think I'm disappearing in this house. Not physically, just slowly fading into a background no one notices. I do well in school, I don't cause trouble, and still, I'm invisible. Jessica shines and I applaud her, but when I do anything at all, it's met with silence. Or worse, indifference. I don't know what I did wrong. I stopped reading. The paper shook in my hands. Sam took it from me gently and set it aside. She never mailed it, I said. She must have found it. She kept it. Maybe she didn't want your grandmother to see the truth, he said. No, I whispered. She didn't want anyone to see mine. The house was just as I remembered, only quieter now. Gran's old cottage sat on the edge of Montrose Hills, past the weeping birch trees that bowed over the gravel path like solemn gatekeepers. The paint was flaking, the shutters crooked, but nothing could mute the warmth that still lived in its bones. I hadn't been here in nearly a decade. My mother had made sure of that. She'd called it cluttered. Too old-fashioned, she used to say. Smells like mothballs and sadness. But to me, it smelled like childhood, like lemon balm and cinnamon and hand lotion from a tin, like safety. I stood at the edge of the porch for a moment before stepping inside. Sam waited in the car. He offered to come in, but I needed to do this alone. Inside, everything was dusted with silence. The curtains were drawn, letting in thin rays of soft gold. The kitchen still had the sunflower teapot on the stove, the wooden spoon jar, the chipped mug that always felt warm no matter what was in it. I walked the rooms like I was moving through memory, each corner sharp with contrast. Here was the rug where I played jacks, the window seat where I read Anne of Green Gables, the hallway where Gran once told me, when people talk over you, don't raise your voice, just become impossible to ignore. I'd forgotten that line until just now. I climbed the narrow attic stairs slowly. They creaked the same way. That sound, deep and aching, felt like someone exhaling from under the floorboards. The attic hadn't changed either. Stacks of boxes, crates of old clothes. Gran's trunk, the blue one with the brass clasp she never let us open as kids. I knelt in front of it. The lock had rusted through. It opened with a slow groan. Inside were letters. Dozens of them. All in my grandmother's handwriting. Each envelope had a name. Most were addressed to my mom, but one stack, smaller, wrapped in a faded velvet ribbon, had my name on it. My breath caught. I pulled the ribbon free and opened the top letter. My sweet Lauren, it began. If you're reading this, then you've come back to me in some way. I hope the attic still smells like cinnamon. I hope you know that I saw you. Every time you shrank, every time they dismissed you, I saw it. And I'm so sorry I wasn't strong enough to fix what they broke. But I need you to know it wasn't you. My eyes blurred. I kept reading. Your mother was raised with sharp edges. Her love came laced with rules, and when you didn't follow the script, she mistook your independence for defiance. That's on her, not you. There was more. Paragraphs of stories I didn't know, memories my mother had erased, times Gran had tried to intervene and been shut out for it. One line stood out, etched deeper than the rest. If they ever make you feel like you don't belong, come here. This house is yours. Not the deed, not the property. This feeling, this knowing. It's always been waiting for you. I sat back against the trunk and let the words settle in my chest like stones in water. Heavy, grounding. She had seen me, through everything, and Mom had known that too. That's why she kept me away, not just from the house, but from the truth. I looked around the attic, suddenly seeing it differently. This wasn't just a place of memory, it was a vault. A quiet rebellion stored in wooden beams and old paper. I stood, arms full of letters, spine a little straighter. This story wasn't going to be theirs to edit anymore. I didn't call ahead. This wasn't a conversation that needed scheduling. When I arrived at my parents' house, it was just past noon. The sun hung above the driveway like it was watching. I had the velvet-bound stack of letters tucked into my coat like contraband. My fingers clenched them tight, not for protection, but to keep from shaking. I didn't knock. The front door creaked open, same as always. Inside, the air was thick with lemon polish and silence. Jessica was in the living room, curled on the couch in one of Mom's embroidered throws, thumbing through a wedding magazine. When she saw me, her body stiffened. "What are you doing here?" she asked, voice tight. "Where's Mom?" I replied. She hesitated. "Upstairs." "Good. I want you both." Jessica flinched like I'd slapped her with a headline. A minute later, Mom came down in pressed slacks and a pearl cardigan like she'd just walked out of a country club catalog. The sight of the letters in my hand made her eyes narrow. "I told you I didn't want drama," she said before I even opened my mouth. "You buried this," I snapped, lifting the letters. "You kept her words from me. You stole what little protection I had left." "I don't know what you're talking about." "These are Gran's," I said, voice rising. "Letters she wrote to me. Notes she left in that attic you never let me near again. You kept them hidden, just like you kept me quiet." "I didn't hide anything," she said sharply. "That house was closed after the estate was settled. Anything there was left behind." "Except you went back," I shot back. "You cleared things out. You left what didn't matter to you." Jessica stood slowly, arms crossed over her chest like a shield. "I found a letter I wrote to Nana when I was 16, I said, turning to her now. "It was never mailed. It was in the back of an album Mom just conveniently sent me after everything else. She's been curating my story for years, but this, I held the letters higher. This proves I wasn't crazy. I wasn't just sensitive. I was erased." "I didn't know she had them," Jessica said softly. "She didn't want you to know," I hissed. "She wanted us separate, always." "Don't be dramatic, Lauren," Mom snapped. "This has nothing to do with Jessica." "Everything has to do with Jessica," I shouted. "You made me the shadow so she could shine brighter. You gave her the stage and handed me the broom. You turned every moment into hers, every silence into mine." Jessica's voice cracked. "Stop." We both looked at her. Tears welled in her eyes. She blinked fast, but they spilled anyway. "I knew," she whispered. "Not everything, but I knew she was harder on you, that she left you out of things. I let it happen." Mom's mouth parted, stunned. "I liked being the favorite," Jessica said, voice trembling. "I thought I had to be. I didn't want to question it, because if I did, I'd lose all of it." "You already did," I said quietly. She looked away. "I found letters to Mom, too," I continued. Gran tried to warn her, tried to tell her what she was doing. She ignored them. "I was protecting you," Mom exploded. "No," I said, stepping closer. "You were protecting your version of me, the one you could keep quiet, but I'm not that girl anymore." Jessica wiped her face. "What are you going to do?" I looked between them. "I don't know, but for once, I'm going to be the one who decides." The law office hadn't changed, still tucked between the post office and the bakery in Old Town, with its brass door handle and the faint smell of dust and ink, like something preserved in amber. I hadn't stepped foot inside since the summer I turned 17, back when Gran brought me along for a grown-up errand and told me to sit quietly in the waiting room while she signed papers I wasn't supposed to ask about. But I remembered, and I remembered the name etched on the glass door in neat serif font. E.C. Stratton, Esquire. I hadn't made an appointment. I didn't care. The receptionist, a gentle-eyed man named Kevin, recognized me almost instantly. "Lauren," he said, "Elliot's in, but he's in a meeting." "I'll wait." I did. 37 minutes. When the door finally opened and Elliot Stratton stepped out, his brows rose in surprise. "Well, I'll be Lauren Chambers." "Lauren Allen now," I said. "I'm getting married." "Congratulations," he replied, then paused. "You're here about Eleanor." About what she left behind. His face changed, not closed, but cautious. 10 minutes later, we were seated in his office. The same wood-paneled walls, the same stained glass lamp. "I need to know what my grandmother told you," I said plainly. "The truth, not what was signed, what she wanted." He folded his hands on the desk. "Your grandmother was a woman who believed in letters." She was. She also believed in legacy, not in terms of money, but voice, memory. I took the velvet bundle from my bag and placed it gently in front of him. "She left these for me," I said, "but my mother never gave them to me. She kept them for years. He looked at them with reverence. I remember those ribbons. She brought a box in, said they were for safekeeping. But after she passed, your mother claimed you didn't want them, that you weren't sentimental. My mouth dried. I never even knew they existed. He nodded slowly. I thought something felt off. I leaned forward. Did she change anything in the will? His silence was answer enough. What did she change? I asked, low and sharp. She petitioned the court to remove a codicil, he said carefully. After your grandmother's death, before probate closed, she claimed it was invalid due to Eleanor's health decline. It revoked a provision in the final section regarding personal effects and what Eleanor termed the emotional estate. What's an emotional estate? He smiled faintly. It's not legal language, but Eleanor believed that objects, letters, spaces, they carry weight. Stories. She left the house to your mother, but she designated certain elements for you. The attic, her journals, her trunk, and a clause stating that the girl who remembers should be the one who decides what gets remembered. My chest tightened. She left me the story, I whispered. He nodded, and my mother erased it. She contested it, claimed it wasn't binding, claimed it was drafted too late to be enforceable. I sat back, heart pounding. She didn't just cut me out emotionally, I said. She did it legally. He hesitated, then slid a folder from his desk drawer. I kept copies, he said. I had a feeling. My hands shook as I opened the file. Scans of pages in Gran's handwriting. Signed, witnessed. I want to revive it, I said. Whatever I have to do, I want it reinstated. You're within your rights, he said, but this won't stay quiet. Good, I said. It's time people heard everything she tried to keep hidden. I rose from the chair, letters in hand. As I walked out, the sun through the office glass painted shadows on the floor. For the first time, those shadows felt like armor. When I pulled into the driveway, they were already there. Both cars parked crooked, like they'd arrived in a hurry. My mom stood stiff on the porch, arms folded, jaw clenched. Dad leaned against the railing, trying to look calm but twitching at the corners like a man holding back a storm. I didn't slow down. I stepped out of my car and shut the door with more purpose than noise. Mom was the first to speak. We need to talk. I kept walking. In private, she added. Anything you have to say, I said without looking at her, you can say out loud. Sam wasn't home. He'd taken an overnight shift, probably hoping I'd use the time to breathe. But this wasn't breath, it was fire. And they'd brought the matches. Inside, I didn't offer them water, didn't ask them to sit. You went to Stratton, Dad said. I nodded once. Mom's voice was lower. That wasn't your place. Wasn't it? I said, turning on her. Gran left me a part of herself. You buried it, you lied, you contested her voice out of a will and called it love. Her cheeks flushed deep. You don't understand what that clause would have meant. The house was a mess. You weren't equipped. She didn't leave me the house. She left me the story, and you rewrote it. Because it was irrational, she snapped. An attic full of paper and grief isn't an inheritance, it's a burden. I was protecting you. No, I said. You were protecting your control. She took a step forward. You're making this ugly, Lauren. I laughed once, sharp. No, Mom, I'm just refusing to keep it pretty for you. Dad cleared his throat. Let's all calm down. I'm calm, I said. I'm clear, and I'm not going away. You're dragging the family through a court fight, he said. Do you know how this looks? Yes, I said, like the truth finally has a microphone. Mom's voice cut in. You think this makes you brave? Running to lawyers, pulling out old scraps of paper? They're not scraps. They're the only things that told me I wasn't crazy. That I wasn't invisible. She turned away, pacing. We've always done our best by you. You did your best by Jessica, I said. You did your best to make me quiet, polite, background noise, but you didn't do your best for me. Silence hung for one long moment. Then Mom spun back around. You want to air dirty laundry? You want to fight this publicly? Fine. But don't think for 1 second you'll win sympathy. Who said I wanted sympathy? I said. I want record, I want truth, I want Gran's words spoken, on paper, in court, in front of anyone who thinks your version is the only one. Her mouth twitched, not fear, contempt. You always had to make a spectacle, she whispered. Even when you were a child, you never could let things go. That's the difference between us, I said, stepping closer. You let go of what mattered. I'm the one who held on. She stared at me. Her face didn't crack, but Dad did. She told you about the attic, he said quietly. She asked you to give Lauren the trunk. Mom shot him a glare sharp enough to cut bone. You said it was better if she forgot, he added, softer now. But maybe it wasn't. Mom turned on him. You said you'd back me. I said I'd protect the family, he muttered, not bury it. And just like that, the ground shifted. Mom's face turned to ice. She stepped back. You want to turn this into war? She said. Don't expect us to play nice. I nodded slowly. Good, I said. I'm not here to play. It was the last thing I expected from her. The headline broke online late that night, a forwarded screenshot from a friend in town. At first, I thought it was fake, some gossipy blog with too much time and not enough facts. But then I saw the photo, Jessica standing in front of Montrose City Hall. A handwritten sign above her head read, "Truth deserves the light." And in her arms, a full copy of Grand's contested clause, highlighted in yellow. Underneath, in the article, her name was spelled out fully. Jessica Lynn Chambers. I read the opening line twice before it sank in. Today, in a surprising move, Jessica Chambers, the daughter of local figures Douglas and Evelyn Chambers, publicly supported her sister Lauren Allen in a growing dispute over the late Eleanor Chambers' legacy. Sam leaned over my shoulder. She went public? She went nuclear, I whispered. My phone lit up. Jessica. I answered on the second ring. What the hell did you do? I told the truth, she said, voice shaking. I went to Stratton after you left. He showed me the will, the notes, everything she tried to give you, everything Mom erased. I sat down hard on the couch. I couldn't keep pretending, she said. Not after watching you fight this alone. You didn't have to go to the press, I snapped. I did, she said, because if I didn't, Mom would spin it again. Quiet rooms, private lawyers, polite lies, and it would die the same death every story in our family dies, buried in the name of peace. I didn't speak. I told them the truth, she went on, that you were cut out, that Mom manipulated the will, that Gran never wanted it this way. I told them I knew. And what did Caleb say? I asked, my voice low. She hesitated. He said I was brave. And then he asked if I was sure. Are you? I asked. I don't know, she said, but I'm done being quiet, even if it costs me. That part hit harder than I expected, because now it was real. Now it wasn't just my war. An hour later, the story had spread. Local news, social media. Some family friend had shared it with a wider network, and suddenly the story had legs. My inbox filled with messages, support, questions, a few twisted accusations. But the one that landed like a brick was a voicemail from my aunt on Dad's side. She would be proud of you, she said, and terrified of how much you remind me of her. By morning, there were more ripples. Mom called 6 times. I didn't answer once. Dad texted, "Call me, please, we need to talk." And then a knock. Jessica, at my door. She looked different, not polished, not curated, just raw. I thought you might hate me, she said. I opened the door wider. I did. And now, I stepped back. Now you get to help clean up what you helped build. She walked in. We sat. No tea, no small talk. What happens next? She asked. I push for reinstatement of the codicil, I said. We go to court. It becomes official. Gran's story lives again. Jessica nodded. And what about Mom? I looked at her. I don't protect her anymore, and neither should you. She nodded once. Okay. I didn't trust it, not fully, but something had cracked in her voice. A shard of truth finally carving its way out. And in that moment, something else settled inside me. The story wasn't just mine anymore. It was a reckoning. The court date was set for the following Monday. It should have been a victory. Elliot Stratton filed the motion with confidence. The judge signed off on a hearing, and the press had turned their lens, briefly, from scandal to sympathy. Jessica and I had begun drafting statements. Sam helped me prepare. We were finally building something that felt like momentum. Then, the leak happened. It was Saturday morning. I was eating toast when my phone buzzed with a single message from a number I didn't know. You should see this before they twist it. Below it, a link to a blog post already gaining traction. I clicked. The headline read, "Private letter suggests Lauren's claims are personal, not legal." There it was, my handwriting, scanned, a letter I wrote to Gran when I was 15, the original version of the one I'd found in the album. This one was messier, less guarded. filled with teenage hurt and raw language. I barely remembered it. Probably wrote it in one of those spirals of trying to be heard without being noticed. But now it was public, every line, every word, including this. Sometimes I wish I had a different mom, one who didn't make me feel like an accident they kept out of guilt. I dropped the phone. Lauren, Sam asked, stepping in from the hall. I couldn't answer. I picked up the device, scrolling, heart hammering. The comments had already begun. Sounds like a personal vendetta. Teen angst, not legal proof? So she hated her mom. Doesn't mean the will was altered unfairly. Why does this feel like a family feud dressed up in court clothes? Someone had turned my own grief into a weapon. By noon, Jessica had called 3 times. On the 4th, I picked up. I didn't know, she said immediately. I didn't leak it, I swear. It had to come from inside, I said. Someone who had access to Gran's personal things. That letter wasn't with the others. Maybe Mom found it later. Maybe she saved it, I said bitterly. Waiting for the day it could destroy me. Jessica went quiet. What do? I asked, more to the ceiling than to her. You don't back down, she said. You let them see it, all of it, even the parts that hurt. I wanted to believe that, but the noise was growing louder now. Emails, messages, even a local columnist calling it a highly emotional family dispute with murky legal ground. They didn't care that my mother had erased truth. They cared that I'd once written something vulnerable. Gran wouldn't want this turned into a circus, I whispered. No, Jessica said. She'd want it finished. I hung up and sat at the edge of the bed. For the first time in days, I felt myself slipping, not from the truth, but from the belief that it would be enough. That letters and signatures could hold up against shame and narrative. That my voice could matter more than the story others wanted to tell. But then Sam came in, sat beside me, and placed a worn envelope in my hands. What's this? Something I found behind the dresser when I was helping you pack up Gran's letters, he said. I didn't read it. But it's addressed to you. I opened it slowly. Inside, Gran's familiar hand. If they ever try to turn your voice against you, remember this. Their fear isn't of what you said, it's of what you might still say. Speak anyway. My breath caught. The timing was impossible and perfect. I folded the letter, held it tight. Maybe they weren't afraid of my past. Maybe they were terrified of my future. The courthouse smelled like old paper and dust. I sat in the second row, fingers laced tight in my lap, watching the door more than the judge. Jessica sat beside me, shoulders tense. Sam was 3 rows behind. He said he wanted to give me space, but I knew he was there to catch me if the ground gave out. My parents were on the opposite side. Mom wore her courtroom pearls. Dad kept his eyes low, like maybe if he didn't look up, none of it would be real. Stratton stood beside me, calm, collected. Reading over notes like this was just another routine estate motion. But I wasn't routine. This wasn't paperwork. This was my grandmother's voice, and mine. The judge called us to order. Testimony was brief. Stratton laid out the case, presenting the letters, the codicil, the chain of custody. My name was brought up more times than I could count. Then the judge asked if there were any other witnesses. Stratton shook his head. But from the back of the room, a voice called out, I'd like to speak. We all turned. The man stood slowly, mid-60s, heavy-set, glasses. A quiet confidence about him that didn't ask permission, it just expected space. Your name? The judge asked. Peter Langford, he said. I was Eleanor Chambers' accountant, and, he hesitated. Her friend. Mom's face drained of color. I turned toward Stratton, who looked just as surprised. Peter was sworn in and approached the front with a folder tucked under his arm. I wasn't contacted, he began, because I haven't worked for the Chambers family in years. Eleanor dismissed me shortly before her passing at Evelyn's request. Mom shifted in her seat, jaw twitching. But I kept records, he said, because Eleanor asked me to, and because I knew one day this might happen. He opened the folder. Here is a copy of the original draft of the codicil, in my handwriting, dictated by Eleanor. Alongside it, financial logs and appointment records showing she was in full cognitive command at the time it was made. The room stilled. He continued, voice calm. There's also this. He held up a small envelope. A personal note she asked me to keep sealed unless the codicil was ever contested. The judge accepted it, reading silently, then passed it down. When it reached me, I unfolded it with shaking hands. If you're reading this, it means Evelyn tried to silence you. Don't let her. Let them see it? All of it. Gran had signed it, the courtroom murmured. Stratton gave me the smallest nod. And Mom? Mom stood. This is absurd, she said, trembling. That man was dismissed. His word is meaningless. The judge raised a hand. You'll have your turn? But it didn't matter anymore. Peter's evidence was enough. Enough to prove Gran's clarity, enough to show intent, enough to unwind every quiet lie that had bound me in place for years. Back in my seat, I exhaled slowly. Jessica leaned in. Did you know he existed? No, I whispered. But she did. She always had a backup. The judge called for a recess. As people rose, I caught my mother's eye. She didn't look angry anymore. She looked afraid. The courtroom was silent when we returned from recess. The kind of silence that doesn't hum, it holds its breath. The judge adjusted her glasses, shuffled her papers, and looked straight at me, then at my mother, then back to the files. Based on the evidence presented, including the verified codicil, eyewitness accounts, and documented correspondence, this court finds in favor of reinstating the late Eleanor Chambers' final testament. She paused, voice firm. This includes the clause acknowledging Ms. Lauren Allen as the designated steward of what the decedent described as her emotional estate. It was done. My heart didn't race. It settled, because it was never about winning. It was about hearing the words spoken aloud in a room where no one could pretend they hadn't been said. Mom didn't move. Her face was locked in that familiar tightness, every muscle pulled toward pride, every emotion buried under decades of denial. But her hands trembled. The judge cleared her throat again. If the petitioner would like to make a statement for the record, the court will allow it. Everyone turned to me, and I stood, not out of anger, not anymore. I walked to the center, notes in hand, but I didn't read from them. My grandmother believed stories mattered more than silence, I began. She believed memory was something we carry, not something we're handed, and for most of my life, I was taught that speaking up was selfish. That truth made things harder. I looked at Mom. I believed it because you taught me to. Jessica's eyes filled. Dad looked down. But silence wasn't peace, I continued. It was punishment. And today, this moment isn't just a legal win, it's a rebalancing. I held up the original letter. This was used against me. Something I wrote when I was 15, angry, hurt, alone. Someone leaked it to shame me. But that shame doesn't live here anymore. I folded the letter carefully. My grandmother wrote that if they ever tried to turn my voice against me, I should speak louder. So I am. I looked at the judge. And I'd like this final note to be submitted to the estate record. The clerk stepped forward and I handed it over. Then I turned back to the gallery. To anyone watching, family, press, neighbors, I don't want your pity. I want you to understand this wasn't about money. It was about meaning. The attic, the trunk, the letters, they weren't antiques. They were evidence. Jessica stood quietly behind me, not saying a word, but standing all the same. And if anyone still wonders why I fought, why I exposed all of this, just know this. I didn't ask for the last word. I was given it, and I chose not to whisper. When I returned to my seat, Sam touched my shoulder. The judge nodded once. Court is adjourned. As the room emptied, Mom remained seated. Everyone else moved, reporters, lawyers, townspeople, but she stayed frozen. Until finally, she stood and looked at me like she didn't recognize what she saw. I didn't flinch. I didn't offer comfort. Because the little girl who once begged for her mother's attention didn't need it anymore. The attic was warmer than I remembered. Late afternoon sun poured through the small, circular window, brushing dust motes into gold. I climbed the stairs alone, slowly, each creak beneath my feet no longer sounding like warning, but memory. I hadn't been back since the ruling, since the courtroom, since my mother's face had gone still with loss and realization. But this wasn't about her anymore. This was about Gran and me. I crossed the floor, stepping over the spots I used to avoid as a kid, the ones she always said were too thin to hold my weight. Funny how much of life I'd spent trying not to break through. The trunk still sat near the wall, the velvet bundle of letters now safe in my home. But I brought something else with me this time. A box. Simple, wood, hand-carved. I placed it down next to Gran's trunk and opened it. Inside, my letter, the one that had been leaked. That teenage version of me who once thought she was unlovable. I'd almost burned it, almost deleted every trace of it from my mind, but then I realized she deserved a place here too. She was part of this story. Next to the letter, I laid a copy of my court statement. Typed, signed, And beneath that, a photograph Jessica had found in a drawer after the trial, one I'd never seen. Gran holding a baby in a yellow blanket. Me. She wasn't looking at the camera. She was looking down at me with the kind of smile people don't fake. The kind I hadn't remembered, but now had proof of. I closed the lid slowly. No locks, no keys. This story didn't need guarding anymore. I turned toward the window, the dust now dancing instead of hanging. From my bag, I pulled out the last thing Gran ever wrote me, the letter behind the dresser. Speak anyway, she'd written. I whispered it now. Speak anyway. Then I set it beside the window and let it catch the light. Because this attic wasn't just full of boxes and paper anymore, it was full of decisions. I walked back to the stairs, fingers brushing the railing, the wood familiar under my skin. Halfway down, I paused and looked back. I didn't cry. I didn't linger. I just reached up and flicked the light switch. Not off, on. Then I left, and for the first time, I didn't close the door behind me.